The wind was a blade against Alara's skin, sharp and merciless. It howled through the jagged peaks of the Whisperwood, a territory so desolate and forgotten that even the rogues gave it a wide berth. For 10 years, this unforgiving landscape had been her sanctuary, her kingdom forged from ice and shadow. She stood on the precipice of the highest cliff, her white hair a stark banner against the bruised purple of the twilight sky, indistinguishable from the snow that clung to the ancient pines. Below, nestled in a hidden valley warmed by geothermal springs, lay Haven, the pack she had built from the broken, the discarded, and the lost. A faint scent on the wind, something other than pine and frost, pulled her from her thoughts. It was blood, and something else, something wild and powerful, yet laced with the acidic tang of silver poison. Her silver eyes, the color of a winter moon, narrowed. Trouble rarely found its way this far north, but when it did, it was never trivial. Her wolf, Luna, a creature as pale as her human form, stirred restlessly beneath her skin. Luna was not large or fearsome like an alpha's wolf, but she was whip-smart and silent as a falling snowflake, qualities that had kept them alive when strength alone would have failed. She descended the cliff face with the practiced ease of a mountain goat, her worn leather boots finding purchase in holds she knew by heart. The pack was her life, her purpose. It had to be. It was the only thing that filled the chasm carved into her soul a decade ago, on the day she had been shattered. The memory was a ghost, always lurking at the edge of her consciousness, its touch as cold as the wind. She had been 18, trembling before the assembled might of the Silver Moon Pack. Marcus, his handsome face twisted with disgust, had stood before her. He was the new alpha, her fated mate, and the entire world had seemed to spin on the axis of his next words. The mate bond had snapped into place the moment his father had fallen in a border skirmish, a brilliant, agonizing thread of destiny connecting their souls. She had felt a surge of hope, so fierce it was painful. Perhaps now she would be seen. Perhaps now she would be more than the alpha's shameful secret, the albino curse kept hidden from view. I, Alpha Marcus of the Silver Moon Pack, reject you, Alara. His voice had boomed, each word a hammer blow. I reject your weakness. I reject this curse the moon goddess has tried to saddle me with. He had spat on the ground before her. An albino Omega cannot be my Luna. You are an omen of death and decay. Your white fur is a stain upon our pack's honor. You are nothing. The collective gasp of the pack had been a physical force, followed by a wave of sneers and triumphant murmurs. The bond, so new and bright, had withered and blackened in her chest, a searing agony that had dropped her to her knees. He hadn't even performed the full severing ritual. He had simply turned his back on her, leaving the poisoned bond to fester and rot within her. She was less than worthy of even a proper rejection. She had fled that night, with nothing but the thin dress on her back and the echoing laughter of her packmates chasing her into the darkness. Everyone had assumed the unforgiving wilderness had claimed her. In a way, it had. The girl she had been died that night, and from her frozen ashes, a survivor had clawed her way into existence. Now, as she reached the valley floor, two of her scouts, Finn and Willow, emerged from the trees. Finn was a beta whose own alpha had cast him out for a perceived failure, his face a roadmap of scars. Willow was an Omega, like her, who had run from a pack that treated her as chattel. They were her family. Alpha, Finn said, his voice a low rumble of concern. We found something, or someone, at the eastern marker. Blood? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Willow nodded, her dark eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. So much blood, Alara. And the wolf. I've never seen anything like it. It's massive, a giant, black as a starless night, but it's hurt badly. Rogues, we think. We smelled at least 5 of them, all dead, torn apart, but he's bleeding from dozens of wounds laced with silver. Alara's jaw tightened. Silver, a slow, agonizing death for any wolf. Her own pack was a collection of strays, none of them strong enough to take on a challenge of that magnitude. Bringing a wounded, powerful stranger into their midst was a risk she could not afford. Haven was built on secrecy and staying invisible. A wolf that large, one who could kill 5 rogues even while being poisoned, would not remain invisible for long. He would draw attention, the kind of attention that could destroy everything she had built. "We should leave it," Finn advised, his pragmatism a familiar and often necessary counter to her compassion. "It's not our fight. We don't know who he is or who is hunting him. He could be an alpha who earned his enemies. Bringing him here could bring them down on us." He was right. Every logical part of her brain, every hard-learned lesson from the past decade, screamed at her to turn around, to let the forest claim another victim as it had almost claimed her. But then she thought of herself, bleeding and broken at the edge of this very forest, praying for a kindness that never came. She had sworn that if she ever had the power to help someone in that position, she would. Her pack was built on that single principle, that no one deserved to be thrown away. "No," she said, her voice quiet but firm, cutting through the wind. "We are not the kind of pack that leaves people to die. We will bring him back." Finn sighed, but nodded, his loyalty to her overriding his caution. "As you command, Alpha." They led her through the dense woods, the scent of blood growing stronger with every step. The scene they came upon was one of utter carnage. 5 rogues lay mangled in the snow, their bodies ripped asunder with breathtaking violence. And in the center of it all lay the wolf. Willow hadn't exaggerated. He was a behemoth, a creature of myth, his fur the deep, lightless black of a cave mouth. Even unconscious and dying, he radiated an aura of immense power that made the air hum. Deep gashes, sluggishly weeping black blood, crisscrossed his massive form. The wounds were unnaturally inflamed, the telltale sign of silver. Alara knelt beside the great wolf's head, her hand hovering over his fur. She could feel the heat of his fever even from a distance. His breathing was shallow, a ragged death rattle in his chest. Her heart ached with a strange, immediate empathy. He was alone, dying and hunted. A familiar story. "He's burning up," she murmured. "The poison is deep in his system. We have to move him now." It took 6 of her strongest wolves, including Finn, to carefully maneuver the giant onto a makeshift sledge of woven branches. The journey back to Haven was slow and fraught with tension. Every shadow seeming to hold a new threat. Alara walked beside the sledge, her hand resting on the unconscious wolf's flank, a silent, steady pressure. She felt a strange pull towards him, a resonance in her soul she hadn't felt since Marcus. But this was different. It wasn't the sharp, demanding clang of a fated bond. It was a low, quiet hum, like a forgotten song stirring in her memory. They brought him to her private den, a cave behind a waterfall at the heart of the valley, its entrance shielded by a curtain of mist and ice. It was the warmest and most defensible place in Haven. She worked tirelessly, ordering her pack to bring her snow to pack around his body to fight the fever, and sending others to gather the rare herbs she knew could counteract silver poisoning. Shadowroot and moonpetal, plants that only grew in the darkest, most inaccessible corners of the Whisperwood. For 3 days and 3 nights, she did not sleep. She ground the herbs into a poultice, forcing the bitter paste between the wolf's powerful jaws and carefully cleaning his many wounds. The silver had done its work. His natural healing was suppressed, almost non-existent. He was dying, and her remedies were only slowing the inevitable. There was a desperation growing inside her, a frantic need to save this stranger that she couldn't explain. On the 3rd night, as a blizzard raged outside, she sat beside him, exhausted and close to defeat. His breathing had grown even weaker. She could feel his life force fading, a great light dimming before her eyes. Tears welled, hot and unexpected. She wept not just for him, but for the loneliness she saw in him, the same profound isolation that had been her constant companion. "Why do I care so much?" she whispered to the unhearing wolf, her voice thick with emotion. She stroked his massive head, his black fur, surprisingly soft beneath her calloused fingers. "You're just a stranger, a danger to my pack. I should have left you to your fate." She choked on a sob. "But I couldn't, because no one deserves that, to be left alone." She confessed her story to him in the quiet dark of the cave, the words pouring out of her like a dam breaking. She told him of her rejection, of the pain and humiliation, of the decades spent building a life from the ashes of her old one. She spoke of her pack, of the love and fierce loyalty she felt for her fellow outcasts. And she spoke of the emptiness that remained, the part of her that still yearned for a connection she believed she could never have. "They called me a curse," she whispered, her forehead resting against his. "Worthless. Maybe they were right. I lead a pack of broken things in a frozen wasteland. What kind of life is that?" As she spoke, a strange warmth bloomed in her chest. It was her own power, a peculiar gift she'd never understood. It wasn't the healing of a pack medic or the strength of an alpha. It was something deeper, a life force she could share. She had used it only once before, to save a newborn fawn from freezing. It had left her weak for a month. Without thinking, without weighing the cost, she pressed her palms flat against the wolf's chest, closed her eyes, and pushed. She poured her energy, her very essence, into him. It felt like her soul was draining away, a river of light flowing from her into him. The cave grew cold as her inner fire diminished. Black spots danced in her vision. The world tilted, and she collapsed beside him, her last conscious thought a single, stubborn refusal. "You will not die." When she awoke, it was to the sound of panicked shouting outside her den. Sunlight, pale and thin, streamed through the waterfall's curtain, meaning she had been unconscious for at least a full day. Her body ached with a profound, bone-deep exhaustion, but the first thing she noticed was the steady, powerful heartbeat beside her. She turned her head. The great black wolf was not only alive, but he was sitting up, his wound still visible but no longer festering. The silver's taint was gone. His eyes, the color of molten silver, were fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. Before she could speak, Finn burst into the cave, his face pale with alarm. "Alpha! We have a problem. There are warriors at the border, a dozen of them. They wear the crest of the Alpha King." Alara's blood ran cold. The Alpha King, the supreme ruler of all packs on the continent. A figure of legend, said to be 1,000 years old and impossibly powerful. His royal guard, the Lycan Guard, were the most elite fighters in the world. If they were here, it meant one of two things. They were hunting the wolf she had just saved, or they were looking for a new territory to conquer. Either way, her small, hidden pack was in mortal danger. She scrambled to her feet, her body protesting weakly. "Keep everyone hidden. No one engages. I will go and meet them." "Alone?" Finn protested. "Alara, that's suicide. They are not looking for a fight, or we would already be dead," a new voice said. It was a deep, resonant baritone that vibrated through the very stone of the cave. Alara and Finn spun around. The great black wolf was gone. In his place stood a man. He was impossibly tall, built with the raw, compact power she had sensed in his wolf form. His hair was as black as his fur, and his eyes were the same startling, intelligent silver. He was dressed in the tattered remains of what had once been fine, dark clothing. An aura of absolute, unshakable authority rolled off him in waves, an invisible pressure that made her want to bow. He looked at Finn, and her battle-hardened beta instinctively lowered his head in submission. Then, the man's silver gaze fell back to Alara, and his expression softened into something she couldn't decipher. "They are looking for me," he said simply. Alara's mind struggled to connect the pieces. The massive wolf, the overwhelming power, the arrival of the Alpha King's personal guard. It was impossible. It couldn't be. Who are you?" she breathed, though a terrifying certainty was already dawning in her heart. The man took a step toward her, his movements fluid and graceful. "My name is Lycan," he said, his voice gentle but laced with the command of 1,000 generations of rulers. "And I am the Alpha King." The world seemed to drop out from under her. She had saved the life of the most powerful wolf in existence. She, the rejected Omega, the leader of a pack of strays, had harbored the king in her secret valley. This was a depth of trouble she could not have imagined in her wildest nightmares. Her pack was exposed. Her life was forfeit. All her careful work, all her sacrifice, undone by a single act of compassion. "My guard will not harm you or your people," King Lycan continued, seeming to read the terror on her face. "They are here only to ensure my safety, a service you have already rendered at great personal cost." His eyes scanned her, taking in her pale skin, her exhausted frame. "You gave me your life force. You saved me from the silver's poison. I owe you a debt that can never be fully repaid." At that moment, as his silver eyes met hers, something cataclysmic happened. A jolt, white-hot and electric, shot through her, a force so powerful it buckled her knees. It was the snap of a bond, 1,000 times stronger, 1,000 times more brilliant and terrifying than the one she had shared with Marcus. It was a supernova igniting in the black, empty space of her soul, filling her with a light and a warmth she had forgotten could exist. In his eyes, she saw the same shock, the same dawning recognition, the same earth-shattering revelation. He breathed a single word, a word that was both a prayer and a proclamation, a word that shattered the last remnants of her carefully constructed world: mate. The word hung in the air between them, shimmering with power and destiny. Alara's mind went completely blank. It was as if the universe had tilted on its axis, sending everything she knew, everything she believed about herself, tumbling into an abyss. Mate. The Alpha King was her mate. The moon goddess, in her infinite and cruel wisdom, had given her a second chance, only to make it the most impossible, unattainable pairing imaginable. No. The word was a strangled gasp, torn from her throat. She stumbled backward, her hand flying to her chest where the phantom pain of her first, broken bond suddenly ached with renewed vigor. "No, you're mistaken. That's not possible." King Lycan took another step toward her, his expression a mixture of awe and a deep, soul-shaking certainty that terrified her. "The goddess does not make mistakes," he said, his voice a low, soothing rumble that vibrated through her bones. "I have searched for you for centuries, my love. I had begun to think you were a myth, a dream I was destined to never realize." "You don't understand," she cried, panic clawing at her. The walls of the cave, her sanctuary, suddenly felt like they were closing in. I am nothing. I am a rejected Omega, an albino, a curse. My own fated mate cast me aside because I was worthless. You cannot be bonded to me. It's a mistake." Her words, the hateful poison Marcus had injected into her soul, came spilling out. She was reciting the litany of her own unworthiness, a desperate attempt to make him see the truth, to make him sever this bond before it could destroy her all over again. To be rejected once was agony. To be rejected by the Alpha King himself would be an extinction she could not survive. Lycan's face hardened, but not at her. A dangerous fire lit in his silver eyes, a cold fury directed at the memory of the man who had hurt her. "The Alpha who rejected you was a fool," he snarled, the sound a primeval threat that made Finn, still standing frozen by the entrance, flinch. He was a child playing at being a leader, blind to the treasure standing before him. He saw a flaw. "I see a beacon." He gestured to the cave, to the valley beyond. "You call yourself nothing? You survived a rejection that should have killed you. You crossed the most dangerous wilderness on the continent alone. You built a pack from the discarded and the broken, and you gave them a home, a purpose. You command their loyalty not through fear but through love and respect. You faced down a creature of immense power, a stranger, and instead of leaving him to die, you sacrificed your own life force to save him." His gaze pinned her, fierce and unwavering. "You are not a curse, Alara. You are the strongest person I have ever met. Those qualities he called weakness, your compassion, your selflessness, are the very hallmarks of a true queen. He didn't reject you because you were worthless. He rejected you because he was unworthy of you." Every word was a balm on a wound she hadn't known was still bleeding. Tears streamed down her face, tears of confusion and shock and a tiny, fragile spark of hope she had thought long extinguished. Could it be true? Could everything she had believed about herself be a lie? Before she could process the tidal wave of his words, the captain of the Lycan Guard appeared at the entrance of the cave. He was a mountain of a man named Gregor, his face grim and scarred. He dropped to one knee instantly upon seeing his king alive and well. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice filled with profound relief. "We tracked the assassins. They are dealt with. We are ready to escort you home." His eyes flickered to Alara, then to Finn, his gaze wary and assessing. Lycan did not look away from Alara. He reached out and gently took her hand. His touch was electric, sending a cascade of warmth through her exhausted body. "Our plans have changed, Gregor," he said, his voice ringing with authority. He pulled her forward to stand beside him, a silent declaration to his men. "We will be escorting my mate and her entire pack back to the capital." Gregor's eyes widened in shock. He looked from his king to the pale, slender woman beside him, and for a moment, utter disbelief warred with his ingrained loyalty. But the king's expression was absolute. "Prepare for their transport," Lycan commanded. "They are to be treated as honored guests of the crown. This is your future queen, Luna Ilara." The title hit her like a physical blow. Queen, Luna Ilara. It sounded like a foreign language, a name belonging to someone else, someone strong and beautiful and whole. Not her, not the broken Omega from the Whisperwood. She wanted to run, to retreat back into the shadows of her valley where she was safe, where she was in control. But Lycan's hand was a warm, steady anchor in the storm of her emotions, and his silver eyes held a promise of a world she had never dared to imagine. The journey to the capital city of Lycaonia was a blur. Ilara felt as though she were moving through a dream. Her pack, a motley collection of about 30 wolves, were treated with a respect that left them bewildered and timid. The Lycan Guard, after their initial shock, were models of professionalism, efficiently organizing the transport and providing food and warm cloaks. Ilara watched her people, her family of outcasts, looking at the formidable royal warriors with a mixture of terror and awe. She felt a pang of guilt. She had uprooted them from the only safe home they had ever known, dragging them into a world of power and politics they were not equipped for. She traveled with Lycan in a heavily guarded carriage, the likes of which she had only ever seen in faded drawings. The interior was lined with velvet and fur, a stark contrast to her entire life of hardship. He sat across from her, giving her space, yet his presence filled the carriage, a constant, powerful hum that resonated with the new bond inside her. He did not press her, did not demand answers or acceptance. He simply watched her with those patient silver eyes, as if he had all the time in the world. "Are you afraid?" he asked softly after hours of silence. Ilara flinched, then nodded, unable to meet his gaze. She stared at her hands, twisting them in her lap. "I am not made for this life," she whispered. "Palaces and titles. I am a creature of the wild. My people are the same. We will not fit in. We will be scorned. Anyone who scorns you will answer to me," he stated. The words a flat, cold promise. "And you are more than a creature of the wild, Ilara. You are a leader. You have already proven that. As for your people," he leaned forward slightly, his intensity making her look up. "They are not just your people anymore. They are my people too. They are under my protection. They will be given homes, training, and purpose within my kingdom. The skills they learn to survive in the Whisperwood are valuable. They are resilient. They are loyal. They are exactly the kind of wolves I want in my realm." His understanding of her fears was disarming. He wasn't dismissing her concerns. He was meeting them with practical solutions and unwavering reassurance. A part of her, the wounded, cynical part, was screaming that it was a trap, that his kindness was a gilded cage. But the bond, the warm, steady pulse connecting them, told a different story. It sang of sincerity, of honor, of a deep and abiding loneliness in him that mirrored her own. He wasn't just a king looking for a queen. He was a man who had found his other half. When they finally arrived in Lycaonia, Ilara understood the true scale of his power. The city was carved from a mountain of white stone, a breathtaking marvel of towers and bridges that scraped the clouds. It was teeming with life, with thousands of werewolves going about their day, their collective strength a palpable thrum in the air. As the royal procession made its way to the palace at the city's heart, citizens lined the streets, their heads bowed in deep respect for their king. Their gazes fell upon her, the strange white-haired woman at his side, and she could feel their curiosity, their questions, their judgment. She shrank back into the corner of the carriage, feeling like an imposter, a crow dressed in peacock feathers. The palace was a fortress of gleaming obsidian and silver, a place of intimidating beauty and power. She and her pack were shown to luxurious quarters that were larger than any dwelling they had ever known. Servants brought them fine clothes and trays of food so rich and plentiful it made her people weep. For the next few weeks, Lycan kept his word. He was patient. He acted as her guide, showing her the vast libraries, the training grounds, the council chambers. He introduced her to his most trusted advisors, men and women of immense power who treated her with a cautious but genuine respect, a deference commanded by their king's unwavering devotion to her. He never pushed her for a physical connection beyond holding her hand or a gentle touch on her arm. He seemed to understand that her wounds were not of the flesh. He was courting her, not as an alpha claiming his mate, but as a man trying to win the trust of a woman he cherished. He ate his meals with her, sometimes in the grand dining hall, but more often in a quiet garden under the stars. He asked her about her life, about her pack, about her knowledge of herbs and the wild. He listened, truly listened, valuing her opinion and seeking her counsel on matters related to the welfare of the common packs. Slowly, painstakingly, her walls began to crumble. The fear in her heart began to recede, replaced by a tentative, budding affection. The bond between them strengthened each day, a comforting warmth in her chest instead of a source of panic. She saw the man behind the crown, a leader burdened by immense responsibility, a warrior who had known centuries of battle, and a soul who had been profoundly alone for a very, very long time. Yet, the ghost of Marcus still haunted her. The words worthless and curse were etched so deeply into her psyche that she couldn't fully erase them. At night, she would wake from nightmares of the rejection, the laughter, the searing pain of the broken bond. She would lie awake, staring at the lavish canopy of her bed, and wonder when this beautiful dream would end. When would Lycan finally see the truth? When would he realize his mistake and cast her aside like all the others? The fear of that second rejection was a cold knot of dread in her stomach that no amount of his kindness could fully untie. She knew she couldn't keep him waiting forever. The entire kingdom was whispering, wondering when their king would officially present his Luna. The pressure was mounting. She had to make a choice: retreat into the familiar safety of her past pain or take a terrifying leap of faith into an unknown future. One evening, Lycan found her in the highest tower of the palace, looking out over the sprawling kingdom below. "I have called a grand council," he said, his voice quiet as he came to stand beside her. "In 3 days, every alpha from every pack on the continent will gather in the Great Hall. I intend to formally announce you as my mate and Luna Queen." Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it, the final test, to be presented before the entire werewolf nobility. "They will not accept me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It is not their place to accept or deny," he replied, his tone firm. "It is their place to obey. But it is your acceptance I seek, Alara. Only yours. I will not force this on you. If you tell me to send you and your pack back to the Whisperwood, I will. It will break me, but I will honor your choice." He turned to face her, his silver eyes pleading. "But I hope you will choose to stay. I hope you will choose me." The sincerity in his voice was her undoing. He was giving her the one thing no one else ever had: a choice. Her fate was not being dictated by a bond or a title. It was being placed gently, respectfully, into her own hands. She began, but she didn't know how to finish. The fear was still there, a venomous snake coiled in her gut. He seemed to understand. "Perhaps," he said softly, "seeing the past laid to rest will help you believe in the future." He paused, and a flicker of something cold and dangerous crossed his face. "Alpha Marcus of the Silver Moon Pack has confirmed his attendance." The name was a punch to the gut. Marcus. Here. He was coming here. A wave of nausea and pure, unadulterated terror washed over her. The thought of seeing him again, of facing that sneering disgust, sent her spiraling back into the frightened, broken 18-year-old girl on her knees in the dirt. She wanted to hide, to tell Lycan to call it off, to run back to her frozen sanctuary where the past couldn't reach her. But then she looked at Lycan. She saw the unwavering strength in his eyes, the absolute conviction that she was worthy. He was not just offering her a crown, he was offering her his strength, a shield to stand behind until she was strong enough to stand on her own. And in that moment, she knew she couldn't run. To run now would be to let Marcus win. to let his decade-old poison finally kill her spirit. Taking a shaky breath, she met the king's gaze and gave a single, resolute nod. "I will be there." The day of the Grand Council arrived like a gathering storm. The great hall of the palace was a sea of power, filled with the most formidable alphas in the world. They were an intimidating assembly of warriors and leaders, their collective energy crackling in the air. Alara stood behind a heavy curtain just off the main dais, her hands trembling. She was dressed in a gown of deep midnight blue, a color Lycan had chosen for her, saying it made the silver of her eyes and the white of her hair shine like the moon and stars. She felt like a child playing dress-up. Her pack was there, seated in a place of honor near the dais. Finn caught her eye and gave her a subtle, encouraging nod. They looked different now. Dressed in the king's livery, well-fed and confident, they no longer looked like strays. They looked like they belonged. The sight of their transformation gave her a sliver of courage. She had done that. She had saved them. Maybe Lycan was right. Maybe she wasn't worthless. Then, she saw him. Marcus was standing with a group of other alphas, laughing, his posture arrogant and self-assured. He was older, his face harder, but the same cruel smirk played on his lips. He hadn't changed at all. The air left her lungs, and the terror returned, cold and suffocating. She instinctively took a step back, wanting to melt into the shadows. A warm hand enclosed hers. Lycan had appeared silently beside her. He didn't say a word, just squeezed her hand, his strength flowing into her. He looked out at the assembled alphas, his face a mask of regal command. "It is time," he murmured to her, his voice for her alone. "Stay by my side. You are not alone. Not anymore." He led her out from behind the curtain and onto the dais. A collective gasp swept through the hall, followed by a wave of stunned, disbelieving murmurs. Every eye was on her. She felt 1,000 judgments piercing her skin, and she faltered, her steps faltering. Lycan's grip on her hand tightened, a steady, unyielding anchor. He led her to the twin thrones at the center of the dais and stood before them, his presence silencing the entire hall. "Alphas of the realm," his voice boomed, imbued with a power that shook the very foundations of the hall. "I have called you here today to bear witness. For centuries, our kingdom has been without a queen. The moon goddess has finally seen fit to end my solitude. I have found my mate." He turned and looked at her, his expression so full of love and adoration that it stole her breath. He was not just announcing a political union. He was baring his soul to his subjects. He was showing them all that she was his everything. It was then that Marcus's shocked gaze finally registered who she was. His eyes widened, his jaw dropping in disbelief. He stared at her, the albino Omega he had thrown away, standing beside the Alpha King, poised to become the most powerful female in their world. His shock quickly morphed into a sneer of contemptuous rage. "King Lycan!" Marcus's voice cut through the stunned silence, dripping with scorn. He pushed his way to the front of the crowd, his face a mask of righteous indignation. "What is the meaning of this? What is that thing doing at your side?" A dangerous stillness fell over the hall. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Lycan's hand was still holding hers, but she could feel the coiled fury thrumming through him, a predator about to strike. Marcus, blinded by his own arrogance and jealousy, pressed on. "That is Alara, a cursed omen from my own pack, a worthless, weak Omega that I personally cast out a decade ago. She is filth, a stain on the honor of any pack she touches. She ran into the woods to die, as she should have. You cannot possibly mean to present this ghost, as your queen." He finished with a triumphant smirk, as if he had just done the king a great service by exposing her. Alara felt the blood drain from her face. The old wounds, the ones she thought were beginning to heal, were ripped open anew. The humiliation was so intense, so public, that she thought she might faint. His words were the exact echo of her deepest fears, spoken aloud for all the world to hear. She instinctively tried to pull her hand from Lycan's, to run, to disappear. But Lycan's grip became iron. He did not let her go. He turned his head slowly, his silver eyes no longer warm, but chips of ice, burning with a wrath so cold and absolute it promised annihilation. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. The pressure of his Alpha King aura descended upon the hall, a crushing, suffocating weight that forced every single alpha, including Marcus, to their knees. Gasps of pain and fear filled the room as werewolves far stronger than Marcus were bowed by a power they could not resist. Marcus struggled, his face contorted in a grimace of pain and disbelief, as an invisible force slammed him to the stone floor. He was prostrate before the dais, forced to look up at the woman he had scorned. Lycan's voice was deceptively soft, yet it carried to every corner of the silent hall, each word a perfectly crafted shard of ice. "You dare," he began, the two words laced with more menace than a roar, "to stand in my hall and insult my queen?" He took a step forward, pulling Alara with him so she stood over the groveling form of her tormentor. "You call her worthless? This woman, who you left to die, not only survived but thrived. She built a pack from nothing. She forged a sanctuary for the lost and the broken, the very people you and alphas like you would throw away. She commands more true loyalty in her little finger than you have ever known in your entire miserable life." He leaned down slightly, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper that was somehow audible to everyone. "You call her weak? Her compassion is a strength your pathetic, hungry soul could never comprehend. While you were posturing and preening, she was saving lives. She saved my life. You cast aside a diamond because you were too blind and stupid to see its worth. You mistook the purest light of the moon for a flaw because you are a creature of filth and shadow, incapable of recognizing true brilliance." The humiliation on Marcus's face was total. His arrogance was stripped away, leaving only raw, pathetic fear. He was trembling under the weight of the king's power. "She is not a curse," Lycan concluded, his voice rising to a powerful crescendo. "She is a blessing from the goddess herself. She is my fated mate, my other half, and my queen. And you, Alpha Marcus, are a fool. You will address her as Your Majesty. Now." The command was absolute. Marcus, choking on his pride and terror, managed to stammer, "Forgive me, Your Majesty." It was in that moment, seeing the man who had shattered her brought so low, hearing the man who loved her elevate her so high, that the last of her chains broke. The fear, the self-loathing, the decade of pain, it all washed away in a cathartic flood. The ghost of Marcus no longer had any power over her. It was just a pathetic memory. Alara stepped forward, pulling her hand gently from Lycan's. He let her go, trusting her. She looked down at Marcus, not with hatred or a desire for revenge, but with a cool, quiet pity. She was no longer the frightened girl he had rejected. She was a survivor, a leader, a queen. "Get up, Alpha Marcus," she said, her voice clear and steady, ringing with an authority she hadn't known she possessed. He scrambled to his feet, avoiding her gaze. "Your pack is on the southern border of my king's territory. I trust you will find your way back. You are dismissed." She had not shouted. She had not cursed him. She had simply dismissed him. With those quiet words, she reclaimed her power, her worth, and her future. Marcus paled, gave a jerky, terrified bow, and practically fled from the hall, the eyes of every other alpha burning into his back. A new power dynamic had been established, and he was at the very bottom of it. A profound silence held the hall for a long moment, and then, one by one, the alphas rose to their feet. They looked at her with new eyes, with respect, with awe. They had not just witnessed the king's wrath, they had witnessed the birth of their queen. Later that night, after the council had concluded with pledges of fealty and congratulations, Alara found Lycan on the same balcony where he had first told her of his plan. The city lights twinkled below them like a fallen constellation. The air was cool, but she felt nothing but warmth, a deep, steady fire in her soul that had finally been rekindled. He turned as she approached, his silver eyes soft and searching. "Are you all right?" "I am more than all right," she said, her voice full of a conviction she had never felt before. She walked to him, stopping just before him, and looked up into his handsome face. She saw her past, her present, and her future all reflected in his gaze. She saw home. "You were wrong about one thing, Lycan," she said softly. He raised an eyebrow in question. You offered me a choice, to stay or to go, but it was never really a choice. She reached up and cupped his face, her thumb tracing the line of his strong jaw. My place has been by your side since the moment the goddess willed it. It just took my broken heart a little while to catch up. She took a deep breath, letting go of the last whisper of fear. I accept this bond. I accept this life. I choose you, Lycan, with everything that I am and everything I will ever be. A look of profound, earth-shaking relief washed over his features. The centuries of loneliness seemed to melt away from him, leaving only the man who loved her. He lowered his head, his forehead resting against hers. Alara, he breathed her name like a prayer. You have made me the happiest man in existence. And you, she whispered, have shown me that I was never broken to begin with, just waiting to be found. He tilted his head, and his lips finally met hers. The kiss was not a spark. It was a wildfire. It was a decade of pain being burned away, a century of solitude being vanquished. It was lightning and thunder, fire and ice, a perfect cataclysmic joining of two souls who had finally, against all odds, found their way home. The bond between them flared, no longer just a connection, but a brilliant, unbreakable fusion of light and power, sealing their fates together for eternity. In that moment, she was not the rejected Omega or the survivor from the woods. She was Alara, Luna Queen of the Werewolf Kingdom, and she was exactly where she was meant to be. Their mating ceremony was held a week later, under the full moon in the ancient celestial garden of the palace. It was not a somber political affair, but a joyous celebration. Her pack, her family of misfits, stood beside the Lycan Guard as the honor guard, their two worlds seamlessly merged. Finn stood as her witness, his scarred face beaming with a pride that brought tears to her eyes. As Lycan marked her, officially and eternally claiming her as his, she felt not a loss of self, but a completion. They were two halves of a whole, a king of immense power and a queen of unwavering compassion. Together they were balanced. Together they were invincible. In the years that followed, Queen Alara became a legend. She never forgot where she came from. She used her new power to establish sanctuaries throughout the kingdom for the outcasts, the rejected, and the lost. She championed the idea that a pack's strength was not measured by the power of its alpha, but by how it treated its most vulnerable members. Her flaw, her albinism, became a symbol of purity, resilience, and a beauty that was unique and powerful. She ruled not just with authority, but with kindness, her wisdom tempering her king's formidable strength. She stood beside him, his equal in every way, her white hair a crown of moonlight, her silver eyes seeing the worth in everyone, because she had finally, truly, seen the worth in herself.